The office hummed with the steady, rhythmic drone of the air conditioning. It was a Tuesday afternoon, predictable and slow, until the double doors swung open with a violent thud. Kale Veyron and Evelise Maratha strode in, their voices overlapping, vibrating with an unnatural level of excitement. They were talking over each other, describing a new ice cream sandwich shop that had just opened downtown. They paced the narrow aisle between the desks, gesturing wildly, their energy filling the stagnant air. Mint sat at her station, a newspaper spread flat across her desk. She did not look up immediately, but her grip on the paper tightened. As Kyle mentioned the shop's signature whipped cream, Mint lowered the page, her brow furrowed, a sharp line appearing between her eyes. The room seemed to grow quieter as she focused on the specific detail. "Something is off about that topping," she said. Her voice was low, cutting through the lingering echoes of their enthusiasm like a blade, the casual atmosphere dissolving into something colder. Mint turned her chair toward the glowing monitor, the blue light washing over her face. She opened a new digital directory, her fingers hovering over the mechanical keyboard. With a deliberate, rhythmic click, she typed the whipped cream white sauce case into the file name field. She stared at the screen for a heartbeat, then leaned back, the absurdity of the title hitting her with sudden force. A sharp, involuntary laugh escaped her, followed by another. She pressed her palms against her eyes, shaking as the tension of the last hour collapsed into humor. Evelise leaned over the desk, glanced at the monitor, and caught the implication immediately. She doubled over, clutching her stomach, her laughter sinking with Mint's. Slowly, the laughter died down, replaced by the hum of the cooling fans. Mint wiped her face with the back of her hand and hit the enter key. She stood up, grabbed her keys from the desk, and looked at the others. The humor was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. They piled into Mint's car, the heavy doors thudding shut against the rising wind. Mint turned the ignition, the engine catching with a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the chassis. Outside, the city had transformed. Rain lashed against the windshield, turning the streetlights into blurred, smeary halos of yellow and white. The wipers moved in a frantic, rhythmic arc, fighting a losing battle against the downpour. Mint gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white, navigating the slick, dark asphalt with calculated precision. No one spoke. The streets grew narrower, the buildings looming like jagged teeth against the charcoal sky. Then, it appeared. A neon sign flickered above a storefront, buzzing with an erratic, dying light. Mint slowed the car, the tires hissing as they rolled to a final, jarring halt. The mission had reached its threshold. They stepped out of the car, the rain instantly soaking through their hair. The parking lot was dead silent, save for the hum of the flickering neon sign above the entrance. Mint led the way, her boots crunching on broken glass scattered across the asphalt. She reached for the heavy handle and pulled. The door groaned on its hinges, revealing a dark, cavernous space that smelled intensely of stale grease and sharp, metallic ozone. They crossed the threshold, the temperature dropping 10 degrees in a single step. The air inside felt thick, stagnant, and heavy against their skin. Mint clicked on her flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom to reveal a small, raised stage. Animatronics stood frozen in the center, their limbs locked in mid-performance, their glass eyes catching the dim, pulsing light from the arcade machines lining the far wall. The architecture was cramped, with low ceilings and narrow corridors that seemed to mimic the layout of a classic pizzeria. Mint signaled for the others to stay close, her eyes darting between the unmoving figures on the stage. She stepped past the party room. Mint moved past the party room, her boots clicking rhythmically against the checkered floor. She stopped before a heavy steel door tucked into the far corner of the hallway. It was locked. She pulled a thin tension tool from her pocket, sliding it into the keyhole with practiced, steady fingers. The metal groaned as she applied pressure, the tumblers clicking one by one until the bolt slid back with a sharp, final snap. She pushed the door open and stepped into the cramped office. It smelled of dust and old paper. Mint shoved aside a stack of discarded flyers, clearing space for the terminal. She tapped the power button, The screen flickered to life, casting a harsh, blue light across her face. She began to type. Her fingers flew across the keys, a rapid-fire sequence of commands designed to bypass the security protocols. Kale and Evelise stood guard at the threshold, their eyes scanning the dark corridor. Mint hit the final key, the system chirping in response. She had access. The screen flooded with rows of inventory data. Mint scrolled past standard sugar counts and dairy stabilizers, her eyes narrowing as she reached the bottom of the list. A series of alphanumeric codes appeared, marked in red. She tapped a key to expand the entry, revealing a chemical compound that did not belong in any food product. She pulled up a secondary database, cross-referencing the code against industrial stimulants. The results appeared instantly. Her breath hitched. The whipped cream was laced with a potent synthetic compound engineered to trigger extreme hyperactivity and manic excitement in the human nervous system. It was not a flavor enhancer. It was a chemical trigger. She pointed to the highlighted compound on the screen, her finger trembling slightly. "Look," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the low hum of the terminal. Evelise leaned in, her eyes widening as she read the breakdown of the additive. The data was undeniable. Every serving of that topping was a dose of pure, manufactured mania. The shop was not selling dessert. They were selling a controlled, addictive surge of adrenaline. Mint stared at the flickering text, the reality of the operation settling in with cold, clinical clarity. The shop was a laboratory for mass-induced agitation. Mint did not hesitate. She pulled a portable drive from her pocket, jammed it into the terminal port, and began the copy command. The progress bar crawled across the screen, a thin blue line of hope. Suddenly, the terminal screen flashed amber. A warning window popped up. Remote access detected. Purge initiated. The owner was trying to wipe the server from a secondary location. Mint's jaw tightened. She slammed her hands onto the keyboard, bypassing the system's defensive locks to prioritize the file transfer. The progress bar stuttered at 80%. Outside, the heavy steel door rattled as if someone were testing the handle. Mint ignored the noise, her eyes locked on the percentage counter. 90%. The screen began to flicker as the purge script tore through the local files. Mint hit the override key, forcing the system to lock the current directory. 95%. The purge reached the folder. She lunged, fingers blurring. The progress bar hit 100%. A chime sounded, followed by the text. Transmission successful. She ripped the drive from the port just as the screen went black. The silence of the office shattered. A low, rhythmic wail rose from the street, growing into a deafening roar of sirens that vibrated through the floorboards. Blue and red light flooded the room, painting the walls in frantic, strobing pulses. Mint stepped back from the terminal, her pulse hammering against her ribs. Outside, the screech of tires signaled the arrival of the cruisers. Heavy boots thundered against the checkered floor of the lobby. The owner bolted from the back room, his face pale, eyes darting toward the exit. He did not make it. The front door swung open with a violent crash, and 3 officers surged inside. They met him halfway across the room. The owner tried to shove past, but a heavy hand grabbed his shoulder, spinning him around and slamming him against the counter. The impact rattled the arcade machines nearby. He struggled, his legs kicking out, but the officers pinned him down with practiced force. Metal clicked sharply as handcuffs snapped shut around his wrists. He stopped fighting, his chest heaving, as the officers hauled him toward the door. The wail of the sirens faded into the distance, leaving the parking lot in a sudden, hollow quiet. Mint stood by the doorway, her breath visible in the cooling night air. She watched the red taillights of the patrol car disappear around the corner, taking the owner and his secrets into the dark. The case was officially closed, yet the weight of the discovery remained. She stepped back into the ice cream parlor. The air still held that sharp, metallic tang of ozone and stale grease. She walked slowly toward the stage where the animatronics remained frozen in their perpetual plastic performances. Their glass eyes caught the dim, flickering light from the arcade machines, casting long, shifting shadows across the checkered floor. One of the figures had its head tilted at an unnatural angle, staring directly at her. She felt the sudden, irrational urge to look away. The shop was empty, yet the silence felt heavy, as if the room itself were holding its breath. Kael and Evelise waited by the entrance, their figures silhouetted against the streetlights outside. Mint took one last look at the stage. She knew the police would process the evidence, and the shop would be shuttered by morning. But the image of those lifeless, staring eyes would not leave her. She turned her back on the stage and walked toward the exit, knowing that the ordinary world she once understood had been permanently altered.